Chapter 2 is about the elements of a complete sentence. A complete sentence needs to have both a subject and a verb. The subject is the part of the sentence that includes the person doing the action in the sentence or what the sentence is about. It's oftentimes a noun, which means a person, place, or a thing, or a pronoun, which is a word that replaces a noun, like he, she, or it. A compound subject is a subject that has two or more subjects. So for example, Luke and his friends listened carefully. The complete subject, the compound subject of that sentence, is Luke and his friends. So it has actually two subjects, and it's compound because it's connected with the word and. You can also have a compound subject that's connected with the word or, such as either you or your brother. So that's also a compound sentence because it has you and your brother. There's also something called an implied subject. That occurs when the subject isn't directly stated in the sentence, but it's implied. So for example, sit in that chair. The implication is that I'm telling you to sit in that chair. So you is the implied subject, even though in the original sentence, it wasn't actually listed. Again, to have a complete sentence, you need both a subject and a verb. Something called a prepositional phrase often occurs in sentences, and it can be confusing because it many times seems to contain the subject of the sentence, but it does not, and it cannot. So you want to first identify prepositional phrases and then cross them out, because that will help you to not be confused by picking the wrong word as the subject of the sentence. So a preposition is a word that tells you the relationship between two words in the sentence. So something like above. If I said that light is above my head, above is the preposition. Other prepositions include words like below, next to, with, under, beside, etc. All of those words show you the relationship between two words in the sentence. And as I said, a prepositional phrase will never contain the subject of the sentence. So for example, if I have the car with the dents is mine, and I'm trying to locate the subject of that sentence. First, I'm going to look for prepositional phrases. With is a preposition, so the entire prepositional phrase is with the dents. This cannot be the subject of the sentence, so if I'm trying to find the subject, I want to cross that phrase out, which means the actual subject of this sentence is car. Car is the subject of this sentence, not dents, because even though that's a noun, it's not part of the subject because it's in that prepositional phrase. Again, prepositions are words that show where something is located in space or in relation to another thing, before, after, under, above, of, etc. Okay, so again, a complete sentence needs two things. It needs a subject and it needs a verb. The subject usually comes at the beginning of the sentence. It tells who or what the sentence is about. The verb is what the subject is doing. It's the action of the sentence, or it shows the connection between the subject and the rest of the sentence. So for example, the car with the dents is mine. Car is the subject, is the verb that explains the connection between the car being mine. Is what's called a linking verb or a be verb. Those are the most difficult to identify because they're often short words and we easily overlook them. Other be verbs include is, are, was, were, became, become, etc. This sentence is a little bit more obvious. So again, we already covered that you or your brother is the subject. That's who the sentence is about. What they did is they left something. Left is the verb. That one's easier to identify because it's an action word. and sit in that chair. Again, the implied subject was you, and the action that you is supposed to be taking is sit. So sit is the verb. You can also have constructions where there's more than one verb in a sentence. So for example, in this sentence, I is the subject, that's who is doing the action, that's who the sentence is about. The verb is should have known. You have your main verb and your helping verbs. This is the action, and these verbs are helping to place the verb tense. I'm never going to test you on what is a helping verb, what is a main verb. What I will ask you to do is identify the subject of a sentence and the verb in a sentence. So in this case, you would need to be able to identify that I is the subject and that this is the verb. And as long as you find part of that verb phrase, that would be sufficient for my purposes. There's also a part of speech called a verbal. That is a word that looks like a verb, but it functions as a different part of speech in the sentence. It has a different purpose. So for example, in this case, going looks like a verb, but it's actually called a verbal. In this case, it's functioning as a noun, as a thing, being going to work. That action itself is a thing. So in this case, the subject of the sentence is going to work. The verb is was, which is one of those be verbs. So in this case, going to work is the subject, was is the verb. Okay, again, when you're identifying these words in sentences, 90% of the time the subject is going to be at the very first word in the sentence or right at the beginning of the sentence, followed closely by the verb. There are a few constructions in which the verb comes first, followed by the subject. One of those cases is with a question. In this case, the person doing the action in the sentence is you, so that's the subject. The verb is are. With questions, the verb is going to come first. The way to easily identify the subject and verb in a sentence where it's a question is to turn it into a statement, such as you are here. Then it would be obvious that this is the subject and this is the verb. There's another kind of sentence in which the verb comes before the subject in a sentence, and that's where it starts with a placeholder word, like here or there. So let me show you an example. There looks like it's the subject of this sentence, but it is not. It's just a placeholder. Are is the verb, and the subject comes after the verb. In this case, it's 5 people. So when you have a sentence that starts with there or that starts with here, those two words, here and there, can never be the subject of the sentence. So you have to find the verb, look after the verb to figure out the actual subject of that sentence. Okay, so that completes this lecture on subjects and verbs. Again, to simplify, the subject is who or what the sentence is about. It's almost always at the very beginning of the sentence. The verb is what the subject is doing. The two things are connected. The subject is the person or the thing doing the action that is the verb.